years ago, I visited New York City and booked a wheelchair-accessible room in a hotel. At least, they told me it was accessible. When I got there, I discovered the door frame to the bathroom was too narrow for my chair. Imagine being on a holiday and not being able to shower the whole time. Of course, the frontline staff members weren't able to fix the width of the door, but they could have checked the door width to let me know my chair wouldn't fit beforehand, so I could have found a different room. This is just one example of how strengthening your knowledge and paying attention to detail can make a huge difference to the service you provide. In this lesson, you will learn the most important point when communicating with guests with physical disabilities and 4 best practices to serve the guests. I'm using person-first language, referring to the person before talking about the disability. Different guests have different preferences, so if a guest corrects you, always follow their lead. Now, let's start. Physical disabilities can manifest in many different ways. Some people might use wheelchairs or walking assistance devices like crutches or walkers. Others might experience difficulty speaking, for example, if they have cerebral palsy. And of course, some physical disabilities can be hidden or invisible. Regardless of the guest's physical condition, it's essential to always communicate respectfully and inclusively. Really effective way to show respect is to maintain eye level. Try sitting down or taking a few steps back so the guest can easily see you without straining their neck. It's a great way to make the guest feel more comfortable. Of course, maintaining eye level might not be possible if you are standing behind a bar or a front desk. In this case, if the conversation takes time, you can walk over the bar to be with the guest. If it's a short interaction, maintain friendly eye contact. Another key point is to never assume intellectual capability. Sometimes, a guest with physical disability might have speech difficulty, such as some cases of cerebral palsy. It might take some guests longer to speak, but they can understand you perfectly. This means you should always speak in your regular tone and speed. Ask them to repeat something in case you don't understand, and give the guest time to finish their sentences on their own. Lastly, be mindful about intoxication-like behaviors. A guest with loss of coordination might display symptoms that you could mistake for signs of intoxication. Ataxia, for example, is a genetic disorder that can have symptoms like slurred speech and stumbling. So you have got to be careful not to jump to conclusions and be mindful that there are different reasons why a person might be displaying these behaviors. To work out if someone is actually intoxicated, observe their actions and be mindful of the entire context of the situation and environment. Generally, if they are not drunk, despite their lack of balance, they will try to respect others' space and mind their own business. If you are still not sure, you can politely ask, "Is everything okay?" If you make a mistake, just politely say, "I'm sorry, I will be more mindful next time." That's how you communicate respectfully. What about offering assistance? Of course, some guests who use wheelchairs or with reduced mobility are very independent. They might not need any kind of assistance. You only need to allow them the necessary time to do certain activities. But if the guest does need assistance, I would recommend 4 practices. First, only handle a person's wheelchair or other equipment if you have permission. Equipment is part of the guest's personal space. Would you suddenly grab someone's clothes or their bag without asking? Of course not. In some airports, there is legislation involving wheelchair handling. Make sure to ask your manager about the law and your workplace accessibility policies and adhere to them. Second, make enough space. The Americans with Disabilities Act specifies a minimum of 32 inches or 81 centimeters in width to accommodate a wheelchair or crutches. Regulations differ around the world, but this is a good general guide. When a guest arrives in a wheelchair or crutches, make sure their path is clear. They may need help removing obstacles like chairs, tables, or anything that's fallen on the floor. As always, ask first before taking any action. You might say, "Where would you like to sit? Can I remove this chair for you?" You may be able to place a small chair next to them so they can leave their belongings on it if needed. Third, make sure amenities are within reach. If an electrical socket is blocked by furniture, move obstacles away. Hotel amenities like clothes hangers may be out of reach for wheelchair users, so you could move them to a lower shelf. Similarly, for a self-service food and beverage like a buffet, you can move plates or cutlery to a more accessible spot. It can be a good idea to offer to show the guest around the facility and see if anything else might be out of reach. And finally, report damaged or lacking accessibility features to your supervisor. I have a friend who flew on an airplane where the accessible chairs were damaged. No one had reported or fixed it, so my friend actually had to crawl down the aisle to use the bathroom. This happens more often than you might think. I've seen many hotel rooms that labeled themselves wheelchair accessible, but the shower had a large step to get in. Obviously, you can't necessarily make the venue more accessible yourself, but you can be more aware of where the venue is lacking and work with your manager to find accessible solutions. Now, over to you. Measure the entryways to make sure they are wide enough for a wheelchair or crutches. Ask your supervisor if you could borrow or rent a wheelchair or a pair of crutches to experience it in your workplace. This will give you a clearer idea of your guest's experience. Before we end this lesson, remember these 3 key points. Maintain eye level when talking with wheelchair users. Only handle assistive equipment with the guest's permission. And make enough space, put amenities within reach, and report damaged accessibility features.